he said, that was the only one that was hanging there when I got ready to come home. That's the only one, and I thought it was my coat. And I said, no, this is not your coat. I said, what you do, you wear this one back to school tomorrow. And then he said, well, when I got my overboots and everything on, this is the only one that was left there. And I said, well, this time you hang that one right back where you got it. And then you don't even put your overboots on. When you come out in the hallway to get ready to come home, you go right quick. And you find your coat and you look, Mama's written your name in it. I said, you'll see where Mama's written your name on that little tag in the back, on the neck. I've written Gail Pollock. And you look, and if it's on that coat, why, then you wear it home. And so here he came. When he came home from school, just as delighted as could be, he found his own little new coat. And I was sure glad to get it back. He left the other one there. I guess the other kid found his coat. I don't know what the other kid's mother thought when the boy came home with a brand new coat. I don't know whether she said, well, we really raided, or whether she said, now you hang this one up and you hunt for yours. I don't know whose coat he got. But they had, Gail was, he did some funny things. One day I was urging him to get ready for school. I said, Gail, you're going to be late. Hurry up. And the tins had come off of his shoelaces. They must have got unlaced, and he stepped on them and broke the tins off of them. He had laced up shoes. And he just was sitting there and by the heater roller, and he was not getting ready for school. And I was urging the kids to hurry and hurry and hurry. Hurry up. Hurry up. Come on, breakfast ready. Come on. Gail, you're going to be late. Why, you haven't even got your shoes on. And he said he'd been trying and trying to get a shoelace through the eyelet that didn't have a tin on it. It just ruffled up. And he said, I can't get dressed. All I've been able to do is just sit here and spit and twist and spit and twist and spit and twist. He'd spit on it and twist it, but when he'd go put it through, it'd just rough back up, and he hadn't been able to lace his shoes. Well, I made sure he got a new pair of shoelaces so he wouldn't have to spit and twist all morning after that. But he was quite cute. He didn't give me much trouble as a kid. One time, well, I better not tell that. It was a little bit more in their life. We had lived in Aunt Maud's basement when we first went up there. We rented in part of her basement for a while, and then we found a home and bought out on Stevens Avenue. She lived quite a long ways from there, and Herman was working on the railroad then. And he said, you have everything ready, and the minute I get off shift at 4 o'clock, I'll come home and move you out to our new home. And I was real pregnant with Lyle. I was expecting him in just a few weeks, and so I had everything, food and everything packed, and he didn't come, and Aunt Maud, she got quite upset, and she stood around. I knew something must be wrong. I couldn't imagine what had happened. I said, well, maybe they've had an emergency out there, and Herman's had to stay longer. And she said, oh, he's just puttering around someplace. He just forgot what he even told you. And the kids was getting cross, and he's getting hungry, and I had no food. My food was all packed up in boxes, and I didn't have anything to feed him, and it was late, and it was 7 o'clock before he got home that night, and he had just injured his hand so bad he'd had to beat the doctor. He just about, well, it was one of the worst injuries that you can imagine. It just took all the skin off of his fingers and his fingernails and everything off one of his hands. He got it into place when they was between the cars or some way. He could tell you all about the injury. But it was all bandaged up, and he just looked pale and white. I just said, ooh, this makes me so mad for a person to tell you to get little kids. Aunt Maud would say to me, boy, I'd give him a piece of my mind. She says, I'd give him the tongue lashing of my life. Have you waiting here with these little kids and everything, and all this furniture and everything, time that I wouldn't get Olene to school on time. And one time that we had a terrible snowstorm in the winter. I think she was about in the 2nd grade. I know Gail hadn't started to school. She was alone. I think it was her 2nd year, because she'd been to kindergarten one summer and 1 year, and then she'd had 1st grade. I think she was about 1st grade. Anyway, it was a long ride in the middle of the winter, and I woke up and the power was off. But it was light. The snow was light. The power was off, but it must have been moonlight, and I couldn't imagine what time it was. My clock wasn't right, and I didn't have a phone. I couldn't call in and find what time it was. And I decided maybe I better get Olene up and get her ready and start her up to school. I knew she had to break a trail to go, and the snow was pretty deep, and I got her snowshoes and boots and everything. I always curled her hair and fixed her a good breakfast and got her books and everything on. I got up in plenty of time. That I always got her. We'd bathe them at night, the kids, for their school the next day, and so we just had to get up and fix their hair, comb their hair, and put their ribbons and their clothes and things on their school clothes, and they usually had to change their clothes. Their play clothes was different to their school clothes and their Sunday clothes. And I got her all ready for school early, and it was quite dark when we went outside, and we thought, well, it was a snowstorm, and it was quite bad, and she went a-trailing off, and I couldn't see anybody else going, and I thought maybe she was way late. I couldn't tell what time it was, and pretty soon she came back. She was gone quite a while. She came back and she says, Mama, I don't know what's wrong, but nobody's been there, and there's no trail broke and everything. And so I found out later that I got her up and sent her to school at 2 o'clock in the night. And here she was with her little short legs trying to break a trail through the snow. There'd never been a snow cleaned off the path, and the older kids hadn't gone to school and broke a trail far. She came back, and so we let her go back to bed for quite a while till it came morning. I don't know why I got her up and sent her to school in the middle of the night. I just thought she was late. I just woke up and thought, well, I've overslept, and the power was off. There wasn't any power at all, and I had to fix her breakfast of something cold like cereal, and make her something that she could eat, fruit and things, because there was no power to cook. And I made a fire in the stove, but there was no power. I remember the power was off. There was no lights. It was just kind of, you couldn't see lights anywhere in town, and I just didn't, I was totally not oriented according to the time of day and night and what time I should get her to school. But anyhow, it was kind of funny. She had quite a good nap afterwards, and we finally got her up in time to get her to school when the kids started yelling snowball on the street and that as they went to school. And the lights finally came on, and we could tell what time it was. We laughed. I think we've laughed through the years about sending Olene to school. And then one time she was riding somebody's bike trying to learn to ride it. She didn't know how to stop and get off, and she rolled right into a kind of a cement abutment, I think in Ashler's driveway or something, to stop or something, and it threw her and hurt her teeth and head and that, and she was quite shook up from that. I felt really bad. But those are little things that happen in their lives. I might tell you that we almost got Lyle buried by Vera, and I hadn't even got him born yet on this tape. But we moved into the home that we lived in several weeks before Lyle was born. The next day, the whole neighborhood flocked there to see the newcomers. They were quite curious, and they came there on the porch the night before while Herman was trying to unload and get us settled in for the night. And asked the kids their name and talked to the little ones a little bit and all, and they came the next day to play in the sandbox outside. And Vera, this girl that I've already told you about, she'd ask Olene, how old are you, and how old's your little brother, and how old's your dad, and how old's your mother? And Olene, I guess, had told her our wrong ages. She'd had no idea of how old we are. She didn't know. And so Vera came over to my house one morning after we'd been there about a week, and she knocked the door, and she came in, and she said, Mrs. Pollock, and I said, yes, and she said, I come over to ask you how old you are. She said, Olene told us that you was 62, but she said, us kids don't think you're that old. I think I was just almost 31 when I moved up there, 30 or something like that. And I said, well, I'm not quite that old. I told her how old I was, and she said, well, Olene said that you was 62, and we didn't think you was quite that old. So Olene, she was telling all kinds of things to the kids that she didn't know. They played in the sandbox a while and then found that the cats, the neighborhood cats, had been using it for a place to dig for their outhouse, and so they kind of had to quit playing in the sandbox and didn't have too much fun in it after that. It was a good place for the cats to dig in the winter. It was a soft place for them to find a place to dig. When I had to go to the hospital, it was my time. I was going overtime a few days with Lyle. And so the doctor told us for me to take a big dose of castor oil and a hot bath, and then to come up to the hospital. And I took this big dose of castor oil. He said it ought to start my pains, and it did. Boy, they started. Took this hot bath, and I was all packed ready to go, and Herman was there, had somebody to take us. I guess we went on a streetcar. And I think Irma, I don't know who was with the kids, but I know I left them with somebody. We made arrangements for them to be taken care of, I know. And we got up there, and my pains was coming so fast, and I just thought the baby was coming any minute that I couldn't get to the hospital. Herman took the suitcase, and he went about a half a block ahead of me, just hurrying as fast as he could and saying, looking back and hollering, come on, hurry, come on. And I was dragging one leg after another, coming as fast as I could under the circumstances, and he was just frantic. He thought he wasn't going to have that baby in time, and he got in there and was almost registered before I could even get through the door. Instead of him taking hold of my arm and trying to help me, he just took the suitcase and ran and figured that'd help us get the baby quicker, because we knew it was going to come quite fast, and Lyle was quite a fast birth. He was a hard birth. I had real hard pains and everything with him, but he came fast, and he was quite a big baby, and Lyle had quite a good-sized head. He had a kind of a rounder head, and it wasn't, it was kind of a harder delivery, but it was quick, and he did come quite normal. But I had to stay there 10 days, and I was pretty tired of the hospital and ready to get home when I got home. And just I think about the day or two after I got home, here came all this stamping and stomping and everything on my... Well, I should have told you that he was born at the D Memorial Hospital in Ogden, Weber County, Utah, on the 29th day of October, 1942. And we were so happy to have him because Herman then had decided that he wanted to go for a basketball team. And Lyle would have made the third member of it. And so he was saying, oh, well, we didn't want another girl. He was going to have a basket or a football team or something, a bunch of boys. And so we welcomed Lyle. I kind of thought he might be a little girl, but he wasn't. He was a boy, and he was a dandy when he came. We was real proud of him. And he looked so cute, and we had nice things for him. And we had her home and was all settled and was real a happy little family. And the kids was waiting anxiously for a little baby. Olene kind of wanted a little sister because she had two brothers. I think she might have had just a little tinge of disappointment, but she sure learned to love him and thought he was great stuff. And on the porch here came this pounding and yelling, trick or treat, give us something good to eat, trick or treat. I didn't know what was going on. I'd never heard of that. We'd had Halloween down at our place before, but it hadn't been celebrated that way. And I didn't have cookies or a thing. We hadn't bought a thing. We didn't know about the trick or treats, the way they did it up there. And that's first year we'd ever known what it was to have trick or treats. We'd have Halloween parties and serve refreshments and things, and then kids would do pranks. They'd put tic-tacs on windows, or they'd tip over outhouses, or they'd turn people's cattle together, or they'd, do things like that. But to to come and ask for treats to every door. We didn't know, and so all I had was some packages of raisins and a big old bushel of apples that Herman had bought. So I handed out apples and raisins and things like that to try to pacify the kids. When I found out what was going on, what they expected, they said, we'll either wax your window or else give us something good to eat. And here I just got home from the hospital about 2 days and just had my little kids around me, and just hordes of kids. Everybody on the neighborhood and from all around for a block or two came. I guess I had 200 or 300 kids come there wanting some that night, and I was sure glad when that day was over. I told Herman, after this, boy, when it gets Halloween, we better get a stock of something good to eat on hand to hand out to the kids, and we made sure we did after that. When Lyle wasn't too old, I think it was along about in the spring after he was born in September, or a while after Christmas at least, he started to seem to have a runny nose and a cough, and although he didn't seem very sick, but it just seemed to hang on with him, and I thought he was getting pneumonia on his lungs. He had a rattle in his breathing, and so I started doctoring him, and I stayed up nights with him. I didn't even undress. I stayed right there by his crib and doctored him, and whatever Herman could converse with the doctor about now and then, and go in and talk to him a little bit or something, he'd come and tell me what to do. We used to boil camphor oil or something on the stove for him to breathe and to open up his lungs and help him. And there was 17 nights that I didn't even undress. I just kind of slept in a rocking chair there by his bassinet in the kitchen where it was warm. I had a fire in the kitchen stove, and I'd boil these fumes on the stove so that he'd inhale them and could breathe easier. And then I found out afterwards that it wasn't pneumonia at all that he had. It was probably the beginning of his allergies. So Lyle was a child that had a lot of allergies through the years. He had hives, and he had eczema. He started to break out with eczema. Sunshine seemed to help his eczema. And I don't know, we gave him medicine for hives several times. Certain things would break him out with hives real easy. And he had trouble, with his eyes. His eyes would get red like hay fever, and so that he had this allergy right from the time he was a little baby. Although he seemed to handle his food, it didn't seem like it was the foods that did it. It was something outside. I don't know, it wasn't diet, I don't think, that caused it, because he didn't ever get sick on his food, and he thrived and grew. He was a chubby, cute shaped little child, and he looked cute in his clothes with his little chubby legs, they weren't gangly and skinny. And that was the health problem I had with him until he finally had the problem of breaking his arm when he was in the 2nd grade. He used to go out with the kids early in the morning, and while I was getting breakfast, and I think they probably fed the chickens and looked around a little bit. I don't think they milked the cow right then, I don't know, or anything, but that was here after we came down from up to Ogden. And he climbed up on the pig pen, or the rail, the boards that went around the pig pen. I think he's standing on them, and they was frosty or something. He slipped and fell, and he broke his arm. He came into the house, and I don't know if it was early in the morning. It seemed to me like I was scrubbing the floor, but sometimes I scrubbed floors early in the morning whenever I had a quiet time. It seemed like I was down on my knees scrubbing the floor, and he came in and he said, "I've hurt my arm, but I'm sure it isn't broken. I don't think it's broken." And here it was, right on the front of it, right in the middle of it. It was just in and out, flopping right out. I could tell it was just in a nail, the wrist sticking right out in a nail. I knew it was broken the minute I seen it. It looked so funny and deformed. And I think we got Bishop Johnson to take, Herman wasn't anywhere in the land of living, over and got a cast on his arm. I remember Mary Wells was his school teacher, and she came by to see how he was, and he's embarrassed he wouldn't talk to her. I think he kind of had a case on her. He thought she was pretty nice, and she was a sweet teacher, and I think he kind of liked her, and it kind of embarrassed him to have her come and see him in his bed with his arm broken, and he wouldn't hardly talk to her at all. But he did real good. It didn't seem to put him back too much in school. I asked her if she'd send him a little work to do, and I can't remember whether she sent his reader home with Garry or anything. I just don't quite remember that. But anyhow, he had this broken arm when he was in the 2nd grade. And then, as he came along through the years, he said some funny things. I remember he tickled Dad nearly to pieces. He used to like to pal around with Gail. He wanted to be big like Gail and the boys and run with them, and he thought he was quite good big stuff, as he grew up, and he kind of went with the kids a little bit older than him at the time, and they let him kind of in on the gangs and things to play with him. Garry was a little bit out, and he started to play with Nida's boy, Stan. Nida come up and said, well, if kids don't treat Garry right, he can come down and play with Stan. I'll take him down and he can play with Stan. And he'd play with Stan sometimes more than he did our kids. But anyway, this time he was over to Mother's, and we had a school teacher's wife that was teaching in the elementary school, Mr. Seavey. And his wife was a real sweet lady, Olene Seavey. She was a Bagley, I think, from over in Wayne County, over that way somewhere. Maybe Cushurama or over that way somewhere. I'm not sure just where it was. But anyway, she was one of the sweetest women I know, and had a beautiful face, a real pretty face, and nice personality, just sweet as she could be. But some way she got blessed with the biggest hips and the biggest backside you about ever did see. It was just squatty. Her clothes just booched out. You couldn't hardly believe it was real. And Lyle went over there, and she was renting in that little house over by Mother Pollock's that Afton and Del Rey moved there and built onto. They lived there for a while and then changed homes, and Mother and Dad had that home and rented it to them. And they were living there, and she came down to see Mother and Dad, and when she got up and went to leave, Lyle was a little fellow sitting there, and after she went out the door, Dad said, he looked over at Dad, and he said, "Phew, what a butt." I just didn't know, but that tickled Grandpa Pollock, and he wasn't one to laugh at anything much like that. Said something kind of cute when he first came down here and went to Sunday school. He came home from Sunday school. I didn't go. I think Garry was kind of little, and Lyle was kind of little, rather. And I didn't take him and go. He was just quite small. And I know we had a lot to do. We was going to move into the Vern Ray place, and I had to get it cleaned and all, and I just came down at the end of the week, and we was trying to get located, and I just didn't take. I sent the kids to Sunday school, but I didn't go. I had to do things that I couldn't make it, and so I didn't go. And when Gail came home from Sunday school, he said, "Mama, the teacher that I had said I couldn't have a mark by my name. I can't be on the roll and have a mark by my name because I'm just a visitor." And I said, "No, you're not a visitor. You're going to be here permanently all the time." "Well, but she said you have to come 3 times in a row in order to have your name on the roll. And then she said you couldn't have a star unless you came so many times, said, so I couldn't have my name on the roll, and I couldn't have a star that like the other kids had." He was quite disappointed. And I said, "Well, who was the lady? I'll have to talk to her and tell her that you're going to be here and to count you here, count you on the roll from right now because you're going to be here all the time." she said she wouldn't put me on the roll because I was just a visitor. And I said, no, you're going to be here permanently now. You've moved back here to live. This is going to be our home, you know. And I got it through his head that we wouldn't be going back to Ogden at all, that we were staying here. And he said, I said, who was the lady? And he says, I don't know. She was kind of older, and she kind of had some whitish, grayish hair. And he put his hands up by his chest and across his shoulder, and he said she looked like she was pretty good across here. Up this part of her looked like she was pretty good. But he says, but down across this part, and he put his hands down on his hip and around to the back, and he said, but this part she didn't look very good, and around the bottom of her skirt she didn't look very good. Well, I found out it was our dear old Sister Frost, and she always wore quite short dresses, and she was real squabby across her hips and sit-down part. And Gail, he described her as, she looked pretty good up this way, but she didn't look very good down that part. And I knew right off from the description, although I hadn't seen her for years, that it was Sister Frost that was the teacher. But she was a real sweet teacher and was good to Gail. But Gail said to me, I said, was there nice kids in your class? And she says, oh, Mama, you just should see little Maxie. He is so cute. He has the fluffiest little cheeks. He's one of these little boys that had these little fat cheeks, just looked like he'd been blown up like a balloon, you know, and just puffy little cheeks. And he said, he is so cute. You just should see little Maxie. He has, this is Max Stewart. When Max was older one time, I was talking to him, and I told him, I said, when Lyle first saw you, or Gail first saw you, he was telling me about you. And he said, you should see little Maxie. He is so cute. He has the fluffiest little cheeks, and you know, he just fired up red, like he was really insulted and mad about that. I thought he'd laugh. You know, I thought it was cute, and I thought he'd probably seen his little kid pictures and knew that what puffy little cheeks and a round moon face he had. But he didn't take it as a joke or anything funny at all. He just ducked his head and acted like he was pretty put out to think I'd even say something like that to him. I always dressed the kids the very best I could, and for the Christmas and for the holidays in the summer, the 4th and 24th of July, I tried to get cute new outfits for them as best we could. And I had some pretty little silk dresses for Olene. When she was about 2.5, she had a real pretty little pale blue dress that was a full teardruffle skirt, and it was trimmed really darling, and she looked like a little doll in it. It's the one I had her picture taken in, the time when I didn't have Gail's picture taken because he was too young and had rubbed off his hair. And she wore it only on special occasions, and she looked so pretty in it. She had little pretty boils and organdies and prints and things that I'd made her and trimmed with laces and ribbons and things that was cute, but they weren't quite as special as this little silk. But I didn't let her wear it enough that she hardly got it soiled, you know. I kept it too nice for her. I didn't just let her wear it about to play and to primary and everything. I kept it for special occasions. And then she had a pretty little, on 4th of July, I got her the prettiest little dress, and it was a little taffeta, and it was kind of a apricot color or a peach color, and it was a little short yoke, and then a real flared skirt, real full, and all of the skirt was accordion pleats. Then it had little rosettes of ribbon in blue hanging down on it, and the lace on the yoke and around the sleeves and things. She looked darling in that. And the same thing happened to it. I ended up giving both of her little dresses away because she outgrew them. But she was older. She was 4 or 5 when she had this little pretty one with the pleated skirt. And then one summer, Aunt Minnie came from down in California out to stay a while with Grandpa Roundy, and she came over to spend a while with me. And she brought the cousins. There was Carolyn and Frankie. Frankie was older. Carolyn was just a little bit younger than Olene, just a few months younger, in fact. Minnie's husband had to stay in California and work his job, and so Minnie was alone with the children. And they came to visit. And Carolyn and Olene were so much alike in size and the color of their hair and their kind of olive skin. And they had the cutest shaped little bodies for little girls. They weren't fat. They were just kind of pleasingly plumpish, dimply kind of little girls with cute shaped legs and arms. They weren't a bit gangly built. And they looked like little walking dolls. And they had their long, shiny, bouncy curls, little pin-back barrettes or bows of ribbons or something in their hair always. And Carolyn's eyes, though, were a bluish green, as I remember, and Olene's were quite a dark brown. And Minnie had bought three identical styled little sharkskin slack suits. One was pink, and one was aqua, and one was apricot color. And she bought three so that Carolyn could have a couple, and she could give one to Olene for a gift when she came. And she let the kids decide which ones Carolyn was to keep and which one Olene was to have. And Olene fell happily heir to the little apricot-colored one, and she looked really darling in it. Carolyn wore the little pink one here when Olene wore the apricot one. And I'll never forget how adorable they looked when we, being their proud mothers, of course, dolled them all up, and we went up town. Everyone along the way stopped and said, "Oh, what cute kids! They just look like twins, and they were so cute. We were so proud of them." Of course, we had the boys dolled up cute too, but it seemed like the little girls' clothes kind of outdid the boys in the summer. The little boys had cute summer clothes, though. They had little short pants and shirts and matching anklets and little cloth hats. It was kind of little sailor style that they looked quite cute in. They wore quite a bit when it was sunny. And they had little sandals in the summertime. But they weren't so eye-catching as the two little girls. And as I look back in memory, my heart just swells with pride. And I'm just really grateful for the fond memories that I have of the kids and the yearnings that I have for those happy, carefree days. If we could only just roll back the scroll of time and just recapture it all once again. What joy and gratitude fills my heart to be a mother. And I have all these memories locked in my mother's heart, in a mother's heart, It just stays there. These pictures come in my mind, and I'm so happy for memories. Carolyn used to cry a lot, though, and Minnie thought it was because she was lonesome for her daddy. In fact, one night she wouldn't eat her supper. She started cried and cried, and she cried the cutest. She'd shut her eyes and just literally squeeze out the tears, and she didn't look like she was feeling bad at all. She'd have a twinkly happy face, but Minnie said she was homesick for Marv, she thought, and we tried and tried to get her to eat her supper, and she just wouldn't. She'd just cry and cry, and finally Minnie just got disgusted with her. She said, "Well, I'm going away. I'm just going to leave Carolyn." And Minnie stepped outside in the dark. And I said to her, "Oh, please don't cry, Carolyn. Your mommy's gone away now. Please don't cry. Just stop crying. Please don't cry." And she just stopped abruptly, and she said, "Why? My mommy says I'm cute when I cry." And then she went right on squeezing out the tears again. And then she hollered, "Minnie, you get in here. I'm going to call the cops on you." And Olene just sat there listening to her cry, and all that went on, she just looked like she was dismayed. She just couldn't believe what was going on. When we went up to Ogden, Olene was still 5, and because she turned 6 in November and wasn't in school, she just figured that she had missed a year of school and that she wasn't where she should be. It just worried her all the time. But she didn't go to school that winter. She couldn't go. She was still her birthday didn't come soon enough. And she wanted to do dishes so bad, but I didn't want to turn her against doing dishes because I had to do dishes every day when I was a kid. My mother was an invalid and she couldn't do dishes, and I always had to do dishes 3 times a day when I was home, and I was always home. And when I went away to help other people, Mother used to send me away to help the aunts and neighbors and them that needed some help. Once in a while I'd have to wash dishes for them too. And when I went down to high school to Kanab, I still had to do dishes all the time. I'd have to come home from school and do dishes. I'd have to do the breakfast dishes before I went to school, and I'd almost get to school late every morning, and because of that. And then at noon I'd have to come home and fix lunch on, and if I didn't get the dishes washed up at noon, I'd have to come home and do them dried on after school, and then again at night. And I thought, oh dear, if I ever have a girl, she's not going to have to do dishes. So I didn't want Olene to do dishes. And so I thought, I won't ever have her come home from school and do dishes. And she never did have the burden of having to come home from school and do dishes. I always washed up the dishes, made sure that the dishes were done so that Olene didn't have to come home and do dirty dishes after school. I don't think it'd been quite so bad if she'd had a sister to help her. But we never did teach the boys that it was their duty to do the dishes once in a while. In fact, Garry Don is about the only one that ever did any housework for me as a child, and he did lots. He did lots to help me. As I think back over it, he washed many a bottles, and he got them out of the basement for me, and he did things like that for me all the time. The other boys put the wood in the stove and got the chips and did the outside work and hoed weeds and did things more like that, hoed the burdock weeds and things. I don't think I let them hoe the garden, but they used to do the things that the tasks that Herman left for them, like feed the pigs and put apples in the pig pen and hoe the burdock and move the wood pile a dozen times a year and all these kind of things, I guess, to keep them busy and out of mischief. But they would do outside work, but they didn't do inside work. But Garry was a sweetheart to do that. He'd help me make beds. He'd help me do things like that. And he'd help Olene when she cleaned the basement once for me when I was pregnant and couldn't do much. Well, he helped Olene do quite a few things. And, he was just real handy. He knew how to do things with a knack. He had a knack at doing things real nice in the home. And when he was right little, he used to come around on the other side of the bed and just pat it and pat it. And I'd say, what are you doing, Garry Don? And I had told him, I said, that's right. Help your mama, and then when you grow up, you can help your wife. And so he'd pat on the bed and just pat on it. Sometimes he'd pull the covers nearly off after I'd get the sheet on. He'd pull on it and everything. I'd have to straighten it again and everything. And he says, help my wife. You're going to help his wife. I was telling you about Olene. I promised myself I wouldn't make her do dishes, and she just begged to do dishes. And Harry and Lisa Ball decided that they needed a place to live during the war, and they knew that we had this home, and they figured that we should share part of it with them. So they come and said, we're just going to move in with you. They said, we're going to have part of your house. And so we just crowded ourselves up no end, and Herman slept on the back porch nearly all winter, and I slept with Lyle in the bedroom, and had other kids in the other bed, and put my kids, doubled them up like to give them 2 rooms of our house. And they had access to the bathroom because the bathroom had 2 outside, had doors opening, one from our side so that we could go in from our part of the house and one from their part. And so they were there, and Olene used to play with their girls. Nelda was a little bit younger than Olene, and the older girl, Wilma, was a little bit older. She was just kind of between them, but she played with both of them a little bit. And she'd go in there sometimes, and they'd have to wash dishes always. And she thought it was just duck soup. She'd come home and beg to wash dishes, and I'd tell her she wasn't big enough, but she could do them over to Niece's. So she got to wash dishes before that. And then she did dishes. She did the dishes up the day that, I know, all by herself real good, the day that, and surprised me, the day that I was going to take the kids to have them operated on, and went downtown with Irma
for a minute to help her make a decision on 2 suits she wanted to wear, and came right back. Olene had the babies all bathed and everything like I told you, and the little boys and all put it in their pajamas and everything into bed, and had the dishes washed and the kitchen swept. She was only about 8 then, I guess, 7 or 8, and she was a good little helper. And her friends up there were one little girl that was right across the street was Loretta Holly, and she had a little sister named Joyce Ann. And then she played some with a little Murray girl that was down the street that was older than her. She was a little blonde, and I can't recall her first name. It'll come to me, but right now I can't recall it. And then she played with a little friend that went to our same church but lived quite a long ways away, and her name was Joyce Burnett, and she went to school with Olene. And Olene wrote letters to her after we came down from Ogden. I think she's one of Olene's choicest friends. Not too long ago, she sent word with Del Rey from a school conference in Denver that she found out Del Rey was a Pollock, and she sent word to tell Olene that Joyce Burnett was there and to say hi. And Olene, from her report from her teacher, Mrs. Ackerson, she said that Olene was one of her most outstanding students, and her report card was always perfect. Never ever had any checks in discipline or how she did her work or department or adaptability or anything like that. It was always just perfect. And but one time she said, "Teacher wants I have to stay after school now, Mama." And I thought, oh dear, what's she done? And I wrote a note to the teacher and asked her if Olene had misbehaved or something. And Olene couldn't explain why she had to stay, but she says, I have to stay every day after school. And I thought, maybe she's getting behind and I'm not aware of it. Here I was tied with the little kids and couldn't do much in the way of visiting school and finding out things. And so I asked her if Olene wasn't doing well, that she had to stay, and she wrote me back a note, and she said, Olene is so creative and does such a good job with all of her artwork and things and the music and the singing. Whenever I need help, I ask her to stay a little while and help me with the children that are struggling and far behind. And she says she does such a good job of finger painting and all the projects that we do, and she's just such a help to have. She says she just seems to understand how to go about to help other kids get their work done after she's got hers done, and she says she does such a good job. She says, but if you can't spare her, I'll have her come right home. Well, I said it was all right for her to stay, and I was glad to hear that she wasn't having any problems with her classes or that she wasn't causing any trouble. But one day she didn't come home from school at noon. She only went half a day right then in the morning, and she didn't come home, and it got clear past the noon hour, and I was worried, and I didn't know how I could leave my baby and the little kids there alone and go hunting her. I didn't know what to do, and finally she showed up, and she was bringing this little Joyce Burnett with her. It's the first time I'd ever met her, and she told me who she was. She says, Mama, this is Joyce Burnett. And she says, I hope you won't be cross at me for being late, but she said, Joyce's mother said for Joyce to bring me up and see where she lives so that I could come up to her house some time to play. And then she would let Joyce come down and see where I live so Joyce could come down here sometimes to play. But then she had to go take Joyce back home because Joyce didn't know the way home the first time. Well, I was glad to know that she was all right. I was afraid somebody picked her up or something had happened to her. I thought, oh my goodness, she couldn't have been hit on the way home from school and nobody by a car and nobody knew who she was and she's in the hospital or something. I had everything go through my mind. So I was really glad. But I told her, don't ever go to other people's houses anymore without telling Mama before asking permission to go, so that I'll know that if you're a little bit late, that you're still all right. And she understood that then, and she said she hadn't thought about how it would worry me. But that was one little thing that happened in her life. And this little Joyce Ann gave me a real scare with Lyle. he was playing right there on the lawn, and he could toddle and walk, and just walking good, and especially if you took hold of his hand, he'd go right with you. And so Joyce Ann liked him. She'd come over and play with him while Olene and Loretta was playing dolls and paper dolls. They played paper dolls. They loved these books of paper dolls that you'd buy for them. And Olene's very favorite book was Lana Turner. She was her favorite movie star, I guess. And then she liked to cut out paper doll book, a book that you got in, it was with babies, that was called Baby Dimples. Well, I was telling you about the scare I had with Joyce Ann and Lyle when he was little. She just walked across the street to our house. I guess she was about 5, and Lyle was just toddling good. And he was playing right there on the lawn, up and down the path, and I was sitting out on the steps one Sunday evening, and over in the park was the lights and things for the circus. But none of us were going over to the circus. It was over in Athletic Park, which was just a block or so from our place. And all of a sudden, Lyle came up missing. And I hadn't even hardly been away. I hadn't been away. I'd just been right there in the yard. But he was gone. And so was this little girl. And I didn't know whether he was with her. I went over to their house, and he wasn't over there. I didn't know where he was. I went in and asked Loretta and Olene if he'd come in the house. We couldn't find him anywhere. He just disappeared out of the clear sky. And there I had him with me, and I was sitting right there on the steps. And we went all over the neighborhood and town, and people was getting worried all up and down the street, and we